Justice League Warworld is the definition of filler when you don't know how to set up for the next movie.
Where on Earth are we?
Not Earth. Warworld.
The newest installment in the so-called Tomorrowverse, which is a reboot of the DC animated movie universe that spanned from 2013 to 2020. And I haven't seen every movie in this universe. I have reviewed Green Lantern Beware My Power, which was terrible, and even just earlier this year I reviewed Legion of Superheroes, which if you saw my review of that, you know I hated that piece of dog shit. So, and I haven't seen the other ones. I haven't seen Superman, Man of Tomorrow. I haven't seen the Long Halloween movies. I probably will, and then I'll rank all the Tomorrowverse ones. And they've already announced what the next one will be, which is Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths, which it was announced at Comic-Con just a few days ago. And the ending of this movie definitely set that up. But how's this movie? How's the movie that sets up Crisis on Infinite Earths? Well, like I said in the intro, this is basically just filler. It's a movie that its entire point is just to be a story to fill the time so the ending can set up for Crisis. And first of all, I don't really know why this was called a Justice League movie, because the Justice League, there's not even the Justice League here, it's just the main trinity. It's just Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. But that's such a nitpick. Now, the main story of this, well, there's actually several main stories, but it's Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman have been captured, and they are essentially transported to an alternate universe where they don't have their memories. At least I think. The entire thing is kind of confusing. I'm not really sure why this was done or how this was done. It's never really explained. But that's the majority of this movie in a nutshell. It's the first hour and 10 minutes of this movie in a nutshell. And, okay, so Wonder Woman is stuck in some kind of Old West. Batman is stuck in some kind of fantasy realm, I think. And Superman is stuck in some noir thriller, essentially. But not exact, but kind of, because it involves aliens and everything. I'll get more into that in a bit. I'll start with the Wonder Woman story. It's not that bad. It was a decent enough story. But again, the main problem with these little stories is that they're not very long. It's equivalent to some of those old Disney direct-to-DVD sequels, like Cinderella 2 or Kronk's New Groove, where it's a series of different stories loosely tied together as a movie. The difference here is that it's one whole story, but it's kind of split off into 3 different or 4 different sections, because Wonder Woman's stuck in her universe, then she gets to the universe where Batman is, and then they both get to the universe where Superman is, then they eventually get back to their universe. Like I said, a lot of this isn't really explained very much, and it is just one big setup for Crisis on Infinite Earths. But the stories in and of themselves aren't that bad. It was cool seeing Jonah Hex and Lobo in this movie, because Jonah Hex was the main villain of the Wonder Woman story. And it was cool seeing him. No, I haven't seen the live-action Jonah Hex movie with Josh Brolin. I've heard it's terrible, so maybe I'll see it at some point, but I haven't yet. But it was cool seeing him in this movie. The Batman story, first off, this is another movie that makes Batman kill. Like, literally the first thing we see is his gigantic body count, and then later on he leaves a man for dead. So, yeah, that's kind of fucked up. That's not Batman at all. Quit making him kill, you dumbass fucking... Anyway. But again, the story is fine. It's like he was hired as a mercenary by someone named Warlord. Or no, he was sent to kill Warlord. And again, none of these stories really have a setup or a conclusion, so they're kind of hard to talk about. Superman is an agent, a government agent, and he's tracking down like a conspiracy that aliens had landed in the area or something. It's really weird, and it turns out the people there are aliens. They look, and I know they're claimed to be Martians at the end of it. They look, but they resemble the Dominators pretty heavily. That's what I assume they were, and they might be. I don't know, but they're just referred to as Martians, so I don't know. And then that they come together and they are actually on an alien ship, and those visions were given to them by Martian Manhunter as he attempts to take down Mongol. And once again, this is barely a story, because Martian Manhunter, I don't think has shown up in this universe. He barely got an introduction in this movie, because he was in the movie for all of 10 minutes, and Mongol was kind of a non-threat. And again, this entire movie just feels like filler, trying to set up for their next big movie. And I guess the final battle is okay, but it has some pretty stupid moments. Like, similar to Superman 2, Clark's heat vision goes right through his glasses, and they don't even get remotely damaged, because that's not how glasses work. And then there's also, the fight scenes in the Tomorrowverse have been really bad. Especially in the Green Lantern movie. The action sequences were so stiff and lifeless, because it's just, anytime someone, throws a punch or something, the other person just stands there waiting to get hit, because the animation is so slow. And it happened in Legion of Superheroes as well, but it was done just a tiny bit better. This one, it's done better. The action sequences have a bit more life to them, and the movements are a bit more fluid. However, there are several points where the aliens are either just standing around in the background, not doing anything, or they're shooting at absolutely nothing. Batman will be 5 feet away, beating up a couple of the aliens, and 2 others will be shooting in the opposite direction for some reason, or they'll be standing there just shooting like this, not even aiming for Batman, just aiming off screen. Whatever. But my biggest problem with this movie is not necessarily the movie's fault. And that being is that I'm getting sick of multiverse stories. I'm just done with multiverses. The MCU started doing their multiverse stuff, like at Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Loki, they got their multiverse stories, they were fine. The Arrowverse had been doing multiverse stories since 2015, but it was Across the Spider-Verse that kind of did it in for me. Because again, Into the Spider-Verse, that was another multiverse movie that I really liked. Across the Spider-Verse just kind of did it in, because now it shows that multiverses don't have to be good. They just have to shove in enough cameos to convince you that it's good. And that's what Across the Spider-Verse did for most people. I didn't take the bait, and I fucking hated it. And The Flash was kind of the nail in the coffin, because that one didn't even make fucking sense, and it didn't even follow its own time travel rules, and the time travel was the reason that the multiverse existed in the first place. So, yeah, that was just the nail in the coffin. So this movie, it's not necessarily the movie's fault, but I'm just sick of multiverse stories. They're not interesting anymore. There was a time when it was a novel concept, back in the 80s, but now it's just a way to get alternate versions of superheroes, just so you don't have to follow the same formula, or that you don't have to be creative to mix up the formula. You can do the same thing, just with a different character. And again, the other problem I have with this movie is that it feels pointless. You could have easily set up Crisis on Infinite Earths with Legion of Superheroes and maybe just, not made this movie, because again, this movie just feels like filler. It's one of those damn filler episodes from the CW network where it's just a villain of the week that sets up for something bigger that could have been set up in the previous episode, and this episode could have been scrapped. Now, I will say, it's probably the best DC movie of the year, by total default, because its competition is not exactly stellar. The Flash was dog shit, so was Legion of Superheroes, and The Doom That Came to Gotham, and Justice League and RWBY. The only one that this has to compete with is Shazam! Fury of the Gods, but even that one's deteriorated a bit. I gave it a C+, but I rewatched it, and it's not as good as I remember. It's not terrible, but it's still not that good. But I will say, I'm kind of intrigued to see what they'll do with Crisis on Infinite Earths, because I did not like the CW's Crisis. Mostly because, again, it was CW level writing, so it was going to be bad because it's on the CW. Nothing they make is good. And before anybody comes at me saying Superman and Lois, that show is not made by the CW. It just airs on the CW. It's produced and financed by HBO Max. It just airs on the CW, so don't even. But again, this wasn't a terrible movie. I will say, unlike Legion of Superheroes, I wasn't bored to tears by this movie. It wasn't exactly the most interesting movie I've seen, but I will give it credit that it didn't bore me to death like a lot of other DC movies have been the last few years. I was bored as hell by Legion of Superheroes and Green Lantern Beware My Power and the Doom That Came to Gotham. This one at least held my attention. But that's not exactly the highest bar to clear, because your movie should keep your audience's attention at the bare minimum, even if it's bad. Actually, especially if it's bad, it should keep your audience's attention, so at least it can be entertainingly bad. This movie's just fine. It's not terrible. I wouldn't even say it's bad, but it has just so many, it just has a lot of small issues, and it just feels like a gigantic waste of time that I can't really give it a positive rating or really a recommendation. I mean, if you've seen every movie in the Tomorrowverse and you just want to say you've seen them all, go ahead. I wouldn't buy the movie, just go for rental. But I can't recommend any more than that. I'm going to give Justice League Warworld a C. So, that's all I got, and I will see you all next time. Bye.